大众请合掌，我们现在开始请法。We would like to invite the great assembly to put your palms together. We would like to request the Dharma now. 恭请大家尊听，为此法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教教我们如何了生脱死离苦得乐。速成无生。Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
南无萨旦陀苏伽多耶阿拉诃帝三藐三菩提伽。南无萨旦陀苏伽多耶阿拉诃帝三藐三菩提伽。南无萨旦陀苏伽多耶阿拉诃帝三藐三菩提伽。南无药师海会佛菩萨。南无药师海会佛菩萨。南无药师海会佛菩萨。
Namo Sivas Medicine Master Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来忏法义。
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to truly understand the Tathagata's repentance Dharma.
诸佛菩萨、师父上人、各位善知识，今天是公元2021年12月11日，我们金山圣寺线上讲法的这个药师忏妙义呢，今天已经进入第10讲了。
Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, Dhamma Masters, and Good-knowing Advisors, Amitofo. It is December 11th, and we have now at Go Mountain Monastery come to the 10th lecture of the Wondrousness of the Medicine Master's Repentance.
我们继续研究药师忏前边的12大愿，是从这个药师琉璃光如来本愿功德经的第5愿开始，今天继续讲第5愿。
So we are now studying the 12 Great Vows of Medicine Master Repentance from the Sutra of the Merit and Virtue of the Past Vows of Medicine Master by Duyalai Tathagata. We're on the 5th vow, and we will continue to study the 5th vow today.
第5大愿，愿我来世得菩提时，若有无量无边有情于我法中修行梵行。
The 5th Great Vow, I vow that in the future life, when I attain Bodhi, I shall enable immeasurable and countless sentient beings who cultivate Brahma conduct within my Dharma.
这个第5大愿呢，就是说呢，假如我将来成了佛，得证菩提，我愿意帮助无量无边有情众生，如果他在我法中或者佛法中呢，开始修行梵行了，我要帮助这一类要修行梵行的佛子们。
Okay, so the 5th vow basically says that in the future, when I attain Bodhi, if there are limitless and countless sentient beings who wish to cultivate the Brahma conduct, my vow is to help this type of disciples of the Buddha.
一切皆令得不缺戒，具三具戒，设有毁犯，闻我名已，还得清净，不堕恶趣。
To perfectly uphold the three clusters of precepts without exception. Should there be any violation upon hearing my name, they will regain their purity and not fall into the evil destinies.
修行犯恨者呢，我一定会加持他们，让他们能够持戒持得满分，尤其是三具境界，一定能够呢持得圆满。假设他不小心呢持菩萨戒持到呢有所毁犯了，然后呢，但是假如他有这个缘分闻到我药师佛的名号的话呢，我一定加持他，让他还复清净。而且因为本来你受戒又犯戒会堕地狱的嘛，或者转恶鬼啊，堕畜生的，可是因为他有这个善根福德因缘，闻到我的名号，我一定会加持他们这些犯戒的佛子们还恢复清净的戒体，他还不会堕三恶道。
So those who cultivate the Brahma conduct will be blessed by me, so they can uphold the precepts without any blemish, without any violation, especially those who are upholding the three clusters of precepts. If they violate any of the Bodhisattva precepts during their process of practicing and upholding them, if they have affinity to hear my name, Medicine Master Buddha, I will help them recover their purity, to return to their purity. Because originally when you receive the precepts, and if you violate the precepts, you may your retribution may be that you fall into the hells or the animal realms. But if these type of living beings, they have blessings and virtue to hear my name, I would like to help them to regain their precept substance, so that to return to purity, so they don't fall into the three evil paths.
所以我们拜药师忏呢，每个月呢在金山寺这样子拜的话，如果明白药师忏的妙义，你来拜，你又能够愿意呢改过迁善发大愿的话呢，你就会越修越清净。那这生死的道路呢，也不会彷徨，也不会怕死了会堕恶趣。
Okay, so when we bow the Medicine Master repentance every month at Gobanta Monastery, if we understand the wonderful meanings of Medicine Master repentance, we are willing to change, to turn over a new leaf, to tend toward good and make great vows, then the more we cultivate, the purer we will become. And on the path of birth and death, we would not be confused or panic. We would not be afraid of death or falling into the evil destinies.
因为学了这个第五愿呢，我们就要更深入去了解说，我们到底要怎么做怎么修才不会再这样子毁犯呢？才能够越修越清净呢？我们的心应该放在哪里呢？这个都是值得我们去探讨的。所以我们已经7、8、9，现在第10，这4堂呢都还在讲，还在这个第五愿，就是因为想要呢，学了这个药师佛的第五愿之后呢，我们一定要开智慧了，怎么样自尽其意。
So because we are learning the 5th vow, we need to deeply understand how to cultivate, so that we wouldn't really violate these precepts. So the more we cultivate, the purer we will be. So how do we do it? How do we cultivate in such a way that we can be better and better in a sense of purity? This is something really worth our time to investigate, to explore. So that's why lecture 7, 8, 9, 10 up to now, we're still studying the fifth vow, because after we learn the fifth vow of Medicine Masters Buddha, we must open our wisdom. We must have our wisdom developed so that we can actually purify our mind.
我们上个星期也是在讲这个三句境界。
So last week we also talked about the 3 clusters of precepts.
那这个三句境界呢，我们上个星期呢谈论到的是第二个摄善法界。
So in the last class, we talked about precepts on gathering in wholesome Dharma amongst the 3 clusters of precepts.
持菩萨戒的人呢，要积极的来修我们所应该要修正的佛法，因为持菩萨戒的目标就是为了成佛嘛，所以想成佛嘛，一定要修种种善法，帮助我们早日成佛。
So those who are upholding the Bodhisattva precepts should proactively and actively cultivate all kinds of wholesome Dharma. The goal of upholding the Bodhisattva precepts is to realize Buddhahood. So we want to cultivate so we can realize we can become Buddhas.
那么什么叫善法呢？这个善法其实呢，三句境界它们是三而一，一而三的，它是互相有连贯的。那也就是怎么样才称之为善呢？必须不会犯律仪的，然后又能够利益有情众生的，就三合一的善才叫善法。
So what is wholesome Dharma? You see these 3 clusters of precepts. They are 3, yet they are 1. They are 1, yet they are 3. They're all interconnected. So what is considered wholesome Dharma? Wholesome Dharma means it doesn't cause you to violate any of the Vinayas. It also benefits all sentient beings. So all 3 in 1 is considered wholesome Dharma.
所以呢，我们上个星期就讲十波罗蜜，就是菩萨十地的修行法门。
So last time we talked about 10 paramitas. These are dharmas practiced by the bodhisattvas of the 10 grounds.
那十波罗蜜呢，就是以六度波罗蜜为主，就是布施、持戒、忍辱、精进、禅定、般若。
Okay, so the 10 paramitas is based on the 6 paramitas, which are giving, upholding precepts, patience, dhyana, concentration, wisdom, and vigor.
然后般若波罗蜜又开出来最后的4个波罗蜜，方便、愿力、智。
Then Prajna Paramita, the last one, Prajna, also unfolds to 4 other paramitas, which are expedient or skillful means, vows, power, and wisdom.
knowledge
or knowledge.
那么这个十波罗蜜呢，都是在自度度人、自利利人去成佛的法门，所以也就是摄善法界。
So the 10 paramitas are used to cross oneself over and cross other people over, to benefit oneself and benefit others. So it's considered the precepts of gathering in wholesome dharmas.
好，那么我们讲这个波罗蜜嘛，我今天就去查字典了，波罗蜜的意思哦。查啊查呢，就发现到呢，智者大师的解释有关波罗蜜，所以我今天想要讲波罗蜜。
So since we were talking about paramitas, I went to look up in the Buddhist dictionaries on what paramitas really means. And I discovered the explanation that the Great Master Zhizhi gave. So we'll talk about this today.
法界次第出门是智者大师所编写的。他还没有讲六度波罗蜜之前，他先解释四弘誓愿。
Okay, so this is the basics of Dhamma realm's sequence. This is written by Great Master Zhizhi. Before he started explaining the paramitas, he went and talked about the four great vows.
四弘誓愿呢，就是为度者令度，为解者令解，为安者令安，为涅盘者令得涅盘。
So the four great vows are to bring across those who have not yet crossed over, to liberate those who are not yet liberated, to establish those who have not yet established, to cause those who have not yet attained nirvana to attain nirvana.
这个是一般人很少学到的哦。可是我们拜万佛宝忏的时候呢，看万佛宝忏的卷首释疑的第3项，他就有提到这一段了。
Okay, so very few people learned about this, but I remember when we bow the 10,000 Buddhas repentance at the ritual section at the very beginning, the 3rd section talked about this.
那我们一般所说的四弘誓愿，就是我们3皈依，就是大家受皈依的时候，当天呢，这个仪式当中就要发四弘誓愿了。然后受五戒也要发四弘誓愿，受菩萨戒的当下也要发四弘誓愿，乃至于到场的晚课都要发四弘誓愿。那一个四弘誓愿呢，就是我们大家所熟悉的。
Okay, so when we refer to the four great vows, this is what we know. This is the four great vows that we talked about after we take the 3 refugees. When you take the 3 refugees in the ceremony, you will have to make four great vows. When you take the 5 precepts, you also make 4 great vows. When you take the Bodhisattva precepts, you also make 4 great vows. In the evening ceremony, every evening, we also make 4 great vows. So this is something that everyone is familiar with.
那个四弘誓愿就是现在这个了，大家最熟悉的哈。众生无边誓愿度，烦恼无尽誓愿断，法门无量誓愿学，佛道无上誓愿成。
So these are the 4 great vows that people are very familiar with, which are living beings are limitless, I vow to cross them over. Afflictions are inexhaustible, I vow to cut them off. Dharma doors are immeasurable, I vow to learn them all. The Buddha path is unsurpassed, I vow to realize it.
这个四弘誓愿呢，跟这个为度者令度哈，这个上面这4个法界初地所说的是相应的。
Okay, so the 4 great vows corresponds to the first of the sequence of the Dharma realm, that to bring across those who have not yet crossed over.
众生无边誓愿度呢，就是指的为度者令度，就是还没有被得度的人，我们要度他。
Okay, so living beings are limitless, I vow to cross them over, refers to bring across those who have not yet crossed over. So if they have not been crossed over, we make vows to cross them over.
然后烦恼无尽誓愿断呢，我们呢以为说是指的我们自己本身的烦恼有无量无边，我们一定要断，好像是断自己的烦恼，其实不是的，它是指的为解者令解，就是有那个烦恼所绑的众生，你要让他这个烦恼解开。
Okay, so afflictions are inexhaustible, I vow to cut them off. Reverse to liberate those who are not yet been liberated. So if living beings are tied up with their afflictions, by their afflictions, we want to unentangle or disentangle the knots that they tie themselves in.
然后呢，法门无量誓愿学呢，好像也是在指我们本身，一定要好好的去发誓，发愿要学无量的法门，好像是对自己来说，其实也不是的，也要包括什么呢？未安者令安，还没有安立在佛道上的人，你要把它安立在佛道上。
Okay, so the next one, Dhamma doer are immeasurable. I vow to learn them all. This is referring to making vows to learn the limitless Dhamma doors. We may think so. However, it's not really like that. It's referring to the living beings who have not yet been established on the path of Buddha. We want to establish them on the path of the Buddhas.
然后佛道无上誓愿成呢，就是说我们发誓一定要成佛，其实也不是只是你个人要成佛啊，因为如果这个四弘誓愿呢，只不过是来除你个人的烦恼，修你的所要修的法门，跟要成佛的话呢，那是不圆满的，因为你既然要度众生呢，你就要帮助自己跟众生一起来，怎么样呢？第四个就是一起来成佛，未涅槃者令得涅槃，还没有得涅槃的众生呢，你一定要呢教化他，让他也能够证得涅槃。
Okay, so the last one is the Buddha path is unsurpassed. About to realize it. It does not just mean that I myself will become a Buddha. It's not only limited to I'm going to eliminate my afflictions and I want to realize Buddhahood. Such aspiration is not so perfect. We want to help ourselves and help all living beings to all realize Buddhahood together. So this is to cause those who have not yet attained Nirvana to attain Nirvana, to certify to Nirvana.
所以大乘不共法就是第一个就是要发四弘誓愿。
So the unique Dharma of Mahayana, the foremost is to make 4 great vows.
我们继续看智者大师的解释。
We continue to look at the explanation of Great Master Zhizhe.
四弘誓愿，弘誓愿是什么意思呢？
4 great vows. What does it mean by great vows?
此四通言弘誓愿者，就是说这个以上这个未度者令度，未解者令解，未安者令安，未涅槃者令得涅槃，这4种愿呢，誓愿呢，都通通不是叫普通愿，叫做3个字弘誓愿。为什么呢？
Okay, so the 4 great vows basically refers to those who have not been crossed over to cross over, those who have not been free to be free, those who have not been established to be established, those who have not attained Nirvana to attain Nirvana. So these are not just called the vows, these are called the great vows.
弘誓愿弘就是广普之源，也就是说发了四弘誓愿的人呢，他的愿是宏大的，是很广的，是普及一切众生的，不是来为自己而发，是为也要帮助众生达到你心中所要达到的那个目的。这是自度度人的那一种广普的结广普的缘，缘念一切众生，这么广这么普及的，这个才叫弘。
Okay, so vast. Vast means it is conditions and affinities that is vast and universal. So these are great vast vows. It means that it will reach all living beings. We want to help all living beings reach their goal. We want to cross ourselves over and cross over other people. So we are mindful of all living beings. These are called vast, vast and great.
然后誓呢，它的定义叫做自治其心，就是你既然发誓我一定要怎么样，一定要怎么样，这叫发誓嘛既然是发誓了，那你就会常常会控制你那颗心，让你的心跟着你的誓愿走，这个叫自治其心，时时控制你的心。
Okay, so the next one is called vows. It means to discipline our own mind. Is basically you're making vows to say, I must do this, I will do this. And with these vows, it can really help rein in your mind. You can control your mind or rein in your mind to always follow these vows that you're making.
这个是英文会不会算是 resolution 呢？
It can also be resolution.
因为最后一个是叫愿嘛愿的定义叫自求满足。什么叫愿呢？愿呢就是你的自愿，你的自愿呢所求的就是一件事情，我要满足我心中所希望的那个目标，我一定要达到那个目标，一直到圆满，就自求满足，满足你的心愿，这个叫愿。
Okay, so the last one is to fulfill your wishes or fulfill your vows. Whatever you're seeking for, you hope to fulfill it. You hope to fulfill your goal, to reach your goal, to fulfill your wishes, to fulfill the vows you make.
菩萨摩诃萨以慈悲圆示真谛，蕴怀广阔，自要其心智，令一切众生同证是真实究竟之道，故云四弘誓愿也。那意思是说，所有的菩萨摩诃萨，他们修行是怎么修的呢？你先翻译，我讲这一句话。
Okay, so these are Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. They use kindness and compassion with their conditions on Four Noble Truth. With a magnanimous mind, they want to discipline their own mind. They make their determination to cause all living beings to certify to the ultimate path of four reality. So these are called the four great vast vows. So all Bodhisattva Mahasattva wish to do this for living beings. What do they do?
菩萨摩诃萨发四弘誓愿，首先是因为心中是存着慈悲的心，他用慈悲心去圆念这个四谛法。因为呢，如果你菩萨心来修四谛法，它就影响到你的修持，是以没有慈悲心来修四谛法。是不一样的。那菩萨摩诃萨呢，他修四谛法是用慈悲心去修。
Okay, so when we make four great vows, Bodhisattva Mahasattva has kindness and compassion in their mind, so they use that to cultivate by using kindness and compassion to cultivate Four Noble Truth. It's very different if one cultivates the Four Noble Truth without any compassion. So Bodhisattva Mahasattva cultivates the Four Noble Truth with great compassion.
所以他的心呢是很宽阔的，他的心呢要的呢，他的志气，他的志愿呢，就是既然这个四谛法是叫苦集灭道，就是佛来到人间呢，一开始说法呢，给阿含教的时候，给五比丘说的就是四谛法，苦集灭道。其实苦集灭道呢，有通小乘大乘的。如果大乘的人呢，原教的人来修四谛法呢，他的修法呢，跟二乘人修的四谛法是不同的心态的。 那菩萨摩诃薩他所以从始至終呢都是離不開四諦啦。那以菩薩摩诃薩修四諦的時候呢，他的心呢他的想法是不同的，他知道是苦，也要斷集，也要修道，也要慕滅。既然要這樣，我不要個人這樣子罷了，我要令一切眾生都跟我一樣修這種真實的四諦法，究竟的四諦法，能夠呢真正的成佛道。
So Bodhisattvas' minds are really vast because the aspiration that they have is for all living beings to be liberated. So they also cultivate the Four Noble Truths. That is the cause of suffering, the accumulation of suffering, the extinction of suffering, and the path to realize Buddhahood. So although it sounds like it may be the same as what the Buddha had explained in the Agama Sutra, but there is a difference between how Mahayana practitioners cultivate the Four Noble Truths from that of the lesser vehicle, because their mindsets are totally different, their attitudes are totally different in their cultivation. Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, when they cultivate, they are never apart from the Four Noble Truths. However, their mindsets are different. They understand this is suffering. They understand they want to cut off the suffering. They want to end suffering. They know it's accumulation. They want to cut it off. They know what they want to cultivate the way. They know that they want to aspire to nirvana, to stillness. However, what they're doing is not just individual liberation, but the collective liberation of all living beings, so that all can realize Buddhahood together.
对，同证四种真实究竟之道，就让一切众生同证，所以这种的心愿才叫做四弘誓愿。
And then so that all living beings can certify together to the four kinds of ultimate path of true reality. So when you make these vows, these are called four great vast vows.
那我们继续看，菩萨若以诸法实相之慧发此誓愿，即是发菩提心，万恨之本，灵觉之源。就是菩萨呢，他如果用诸法实相的智慧，就是他明白一切诸法的实相，他有了这种智慧，了解诸法的实相之后，他一发了这四弘誓愿呢，他就是叫做发了菩提心了。所以这一种四弘誓愿呢，也叫菩提心，也叫万恨之本，也叫灵觉之源。
Okay, so if Bodhisattva, Mahasattva use the wisdom of true reality of all dharmas to bring forth the four vows, it is considered that they are bringing forth the Bodhi resolve. This is the basis of myriad practices and the source of a spiritual awakening. So what this means is that if Bodhisattva use the wisdom of all true realities, they understand the true realities of all dharmas, and they based on this, they make four great vast vows. This is called bring forth the Bodhi resolve, or resolve upon Bodhi. This is the basis of myriad practices, the source of all spiritual awakening.
所以你如果大家很明白这个四弘誓愿的真正的意识的话呢，相信呢你跟众生在一起的时候呢，相处或者我们还在娑婆世界这段日子，你看到娑婆世界的众生呢造了很多不善之业的时候，你的心态会改变的。如果你有四弘誓愿。
Okay. So if we all really understand the four great vast vows, when we are with living beings, and maybe you see, or we're spending our days in the Saha world, when you see living beings create unwholesome karma, if you have these four great vast vows, then your mind will be different.
因为呢 发了这种心之后呢，你就会修万恨，所以这个心是会导致你修各种的万恨来去，就说若善若恶，若顺若逆，你都是修万恨的时候，因为你的心是充满四弘誓愿，它是万恨之本，它会推动你逆顺苦乐善恶，你都会修万恨，而不是起烦恼心。
Okay, because when you make this 4 great vast vows, you will cultivate myriad practices, whether you see wholesome karma and wholesome karma that living beings are creating, you will cultivate myriad practices. This means whether you are in favorable conditions, unfavorable conditions, whether you're suffering, whether you're happy, whether you're seeing wholesome Dharma or unwholesome Dharma, you will be able to cultivate myriad practices
而不是生烦恼心。
instead of giving rise to afflictions.
对，因为四弘誓愿第二个就是要解烦恼，不是看到有烦恼的境界不好境界，你来起烦恼，那你根本就违背你的解烦恼的这个四弘誓愿嘛。
Okay, so these are 4 great vast vows. The second one is to untie yourself from afflictions. It does not mean that when you see the situation or when you're being afflicted, you become afflicted continuously. This would go against the second great vast vows.
所以说它是万恨之本，它会让你呢遇到多苦的事情啊，多不善的事情，你还是修菩萨恨，你绝对不是呢妄思菩提心来造这个起恶念的，不会的。
Okay, so this is called the basis of myriad practices. So when we encounter different situations, doesn't matter how hard it is, how difficult it is, how harsh the situation is, you will continue to practice, you will continue to cultivate the Bodhisattva's practice. You will not lose your Bodhi resolve to cultivate or give rise to any evil thoughts.
然后灵觉之源，它会让你呢越来越觉悟，越来越有跟你的佛性的觉悟呢相应，让你很快能够成正觉啦。
Okay, and so this is the source of spiritual awakening. You will be more and more awakened. You'll be more and more enlightened. Your mind will correspond with awakening more and more, so that you can realize Buddhahood.
所以这个四弘誓愿呢，真的非常重要。你假如有一天你又在起烦恼心，因为一些人事的话，那就表示你当下一定是忘了你的四弘誓愿了。
Okay, so the 4 great vast vows are very important. Let's say if one day you give rise to afflictions, at that very moment, you probably have forgotten your 4 great vast vows.
然后你是在迷而不是觉。
You're in confusion instead of in enlightenment.
对，因为四弘誓愿是让你充满灵觉的心。
Because 4 great vast vows cause you to be filled up with the mind of a spiritual awakening.
他说是以一切大事由四弘誓囊结修因，也就是因为这样呢，所有一切的法身大事的菩萨摩诃萨呢，因为他自己真心发了四弘誓愿之后，他用无量劫的时间一直在修他的因地的成佛的法门，他一直在修他的因地的法门，没有停止过，用无量劫不断的一直修，就是什么力量推动他不退菩提心一直修下去呢？因为就是以上所说的四弘誓愿。
Okay, so therefore, all Bodhisattva, Mahasattva cultivate such causes for eons due to this vast vows. So this means that because of these great vast vows, all the Bodhisattvas who have realized their great Dharma body, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, have used limitless, countless, infinite eons of time to practice this Dhamma door at their causal ground. They continue to cultivate without any retreat, without retreating their Bodhi resolve. So what propels them to continue to cultivate like that? What's the force behind it or the strength behind it? The strength comes from the four great vast vows.
十方大圣言此誓愿，常处生死，广度众生而不永灭。这一段呢，真的是值得我们佩服的。他说，十方世界的所有一些大圣人哦，他们就是因为自己发了四弘誓愿哦，他就宁可永远处在生死轮回的国度当中，去所有十方有生死的这种慧度，去那里去广度众生，而不愿意永远入灭。入那个涅槃，他不入涅槃，就因为他一直到生死国的世界去受轮回，去那边广度众生。为什么他会这样子呢？不去享受永远的大涅槃，早日取正觉，而要继续度众生呢？就因为他的四弘誓愿的那个力量支持着他。
Okay, so all the sages of the 10 directions, based on these four great vows, will always stay in birth and death, cross over living beings everywhere, without entering stillness. So this is actually very admirable because Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are always staying in birth and death to transmigrate with all living beings. In order to cross them over universally. So they are always transmigrating in birth and death. Why don't they go enjoy nirvana? Instead, they vow to cross over living beings. It's all because they are supported by the four great vast vows.
有些人呢，虽然是学大乘法，然后也修了净土法门，然后呢，看到这个娑婆世界的趋向，尤其是现在在疫情当中，还有人心不古。你看呢，食物呢都是呢很多都有毒药哈，很多都有防腐剂啊、催熟剂呀，所以呢，吃到的小孩子呢都早熟了啊，性早熟，几岁呢就有月经，然后呢就长胡须。小孩子呢就不健全，就是我们人害人，就是看到这个我们吃的东西都有毒，有的人说不吃也死，吃也死，所以也就是说，现在人为什么个个都得大病而死，都因为吃的东西都有毒啦。那我们处在这一种呢很恶劣的世界，人心不古，大家都为了各自的利益呢，做了伤害别人的事情，他们也觉得没办法，为了生活，所以人心呢已经没有那种道德。我们呢活在这个时代，看到这样子的众生，有些人就会觉得，哎，我还是赶快去极乐世界了，活久一点的身体就因为吃了这些东西嘛，就越来越差，以后就病得很惨，就还是早一点往生好了。有些人会这么样想要做治疗汉。然后就想要离开这个不好的世界，不好的人。我觉得这一种的发心呢，你们想想看，是不是发四弘誓愿的心态呢？
Okay, so some people who are learning the Mahayana Dhamma see the trend in the Saha world, especially during the pandemic, and you see that people's mind are no longer wholesome, incomparable to people in ancient time. There are all kinds of poison in our food, preservatives, all kinds of chemicals that catalyze the maturity of children. They're grown prematurely. They have period in very young age, or they grow mustache in an earlier age than they're supposed to. So some people think, oh, if we don't eat these kind of food, we will die. If we eat it, we will die. So that's why a lot of people nowadays die from great sickness because our food has a lot of poisons that we don't see. But people who are making these food with poisons or so-called poisons, for either for their own name, fame, or benefits, they have to harm people. But they are hopeless either because they are trying to benefit themselves. So people's mind no longer have any kind of integrity or virtue. And then others observe that living in this world is really uninteresting and meaningless. We might as well hurry and go to the Pure Land. So if we really want to leave this world with this kind of attitude and seeing these bad people, is this kind of attitude making for great vast vows?
是不是跟四弘誓愿相应啊？这种心态。
Does this kind of attitude correspond with 4 great vast vows?
然后呢，我们再看今明不共之法，先从弘誓为始，意在此也。因为这个法界次第出门这个地方呢，已经开始介绍菩萨不共法嘛。然后他先解释四弘誓愿呢，就是目的就是因为这个四弘誓愿是使菩萨修万恨的一个推动力，所以一定要先讲四弘誓愿。
So let's continue. Let's go on. So now I am explaining this unique Dharma. It starts with vast vows. This is the meaning. So in the basis of the sequence of the Dharma realm, it introduces the unique Dharma of Bodhisattvas. It first introduces the 4 great vast vows. So the strength that propels Bodhisattvas to cultivate merit practices is 4 vast vows, 4 great vast vows.
好，我们现在来讲第一个，未度者令度是怎么修呢？
So how do we cultivate to cross over those who have not been crossed?
你发了未度者令度的愿呢，是因为你缘念苦地而发的。
The reason why we bring forth this vow is because we are mindful of the noble truth of suffering.
所以呢，菩萨璎珞经里面说，未度苦地，令度苦地。那些众生呢，还没有把苦的这个真谛呢度脱过去的话，我一定要令他们呢度过这个苦地。
Okay, so the Diadem Sutra says that those who have not crossed over the noble truth of suffering, I will help them cross over the noble truth of suffering.
那么这个苦地的苦是指什么呢？就是指生死的苦。
What is the noble truth of suffering referring to? It's referring to birth and death.
所以呢，未度者令度，就是要度众生了生脱死，因为我们的苦就是生死的轮回的苦。
So to cross over those who have not been crossed over, it means to cross over living beings to end their birth and death.
我们呢，环境被染污，水也染污，空气也染污，食物也染污，所以我们呢，举心动念哦，每天过日子三餐呢，所吃的、所喝的呢，都有毒素了，所以我们生的活在这样的环境呢，就很容易病。然后病得很惨而死，所以这种生死是一个很大的过患，是很痛苦的一个过程啊。你多么快乐，你追求人生呢，赚了很多钱呢，你也不能够解决这个大问题，每天都要吃嘛，都要喝啊，都要呼吸啊，那呼吸的空气也有毒啊，那你怎么办呢？所以呢，金钱并不能让你离开这个生老病死的痛苦的。
Okay, so our environment, our food, water, and drink are all poisonous or in somewhat contaminated. Whatever we eat in our 3 meals, whatever we eat, whatever we drink, has some sort of poison in it, one way or another. So it's people easily get sick. Eventually, we die. So birth and death is really a problem for us. People may be seeking lots of things in their life. They may be making lots of money, but really making money can really solve this problem of birth and death. We eat, we drink, and we even breathe the air. We can make lots of money, but that really cannot solve the problem of suffering from birth and death.
然后这个苦还包括呢，我们呢，就是看很多手机哈，一直看啊，或者看电脑、看手机看太多了，我们的眼睛呢视力呢也受损，所以很多人就得白内障啊，各种眼病、青光眼，乃至于呢，还有人因为吃了那些有毒素的食物啦，或者就是炸过的油啊等等的啦，种种问题都会导致你老了，很多人呢就变成患了痴呆症，就失忆症。所以呢，这是很糟糕的事情。如果对修道的人来讲，如果老了呢有失忆症呢，那真的是会很大障碍的。所以我们在这种生死国里面修行或者想度众生是的确不易，可是这个就是所有十方菩萨摩萨愿意做的事情，他不会舍弃这个这么不好的世界的，他还是愿意在这样不好的世界里面呢，让自己有办法自度度人的，这个就是菩萨的发心。
Okay, so this kind of suffering also includes using too much cell phone, using too much computer, to a point that your visions are somewhat damaged. That's why a lot of people have cataract or glaucoma, all kinds of problems. Or eventually, when people get old, they may have Alzheimer's disease. And if with Alzheimer's disease, it's actually a serious obstruction. It's very terrible for cultivators. So all is not very easy, but Bodhisattva, Mahasattvas in the 10 directions would never abandon, never renounce living beings, never abandon this terrible world. They have a way to cross themselves over and cross other people over. This is the resolve of all Bodhisattva Mahasattvas.
那么生死有2种，第一个叫分段生死分段生死呢，就是6道的众生哦。我们有这个5蕴生，然后又有6根然后还要呢6根对6尘产生6世，就有18界就是每天用这个5阴6入跟18界的这个身体咯这种的果报呢是很粗劣的，它有行执分段的成坏。分段生死就是我们目前每个人的这个色身哦，有一段一段的咯你今世呢可能来人间，你的生命只有80年，所以叫这个分段生死，你这一生只有80年它有一个生老病死，就是一个成坏的一个过程，这个是粗的生死。
Okay. So there are 2 kinds of birth and death. The first is birth and death by sections, or we call physical birth and death, meaning that all living beings in the 6th path comes from the 5 skandhas. Then the 6 sense faculties match up with the 6 perceived objects. Then we have 6 consciousness. All of them together is called the 18 realms. These are very coarse retributions that has shape and form. So it has sections. So we also call birth and death by sections. Let's say you come to this world in a human realm, you come to live here for 80 years, and then you die. So this is the process of establishment and decay.
第2种叫变异生死变异生死呢，就 能够就是说承受变异生死的呢，是阿罗汉跟辟支佛，还有大力菩萨，这所有那些就是法身大士的菩萨们呢，或者是说初地以上的菩萨们呢，他们呢就不需要有这种分段生死的苦了，但是他们还有变异生死。譬如他们有3种异生身，就是他们所修正的一些三昧呢，使到他们有能力可以意念就生出一个身体来去度化众生但是这个也是有一个生出来一个身体跟这个身体不见了变了，还是有那种变异但是他这种变异生死已经不像分段生死这么样苦了的啦他说虽然没有分段的粗暴呢，还是会有这种维系因转果移的一种变化变异生灭的千变都有这种千变，所以还是算生死轮回的，但是这个叫变异生死，是圣人的生死。
Okay, so the second type of birth and death is called birth and death by changes. These are experienced by arhats, pratyeka Buddhas, or bodhisattvas of great strength. They no longer have a physical birth and death because they can have mind-made bodies with the intention of the mind. They can create transformation body to cross over living beings, but they still have changes. Although they don't have the coarse suffering of physical birth and death, but they are still subtle causes, turnings, and changes with the retributions or with the results. So these are changes from these are transformation or changes from what comes into being and what ceases to be, what arises and what passes.
那么呢，若一切未度2种生死苦者，菩萨发心愿令得度，故云未度者令度。所以呢，我们以后记得四弘誓愿第1条愿，我们就是要学菩萨发心，看到一切还没有度脱生死苦2种生死苦的众生，我们一定要发心要去度他们，让他们呢也可以呢度脱这2种生死的苦。所以说未度者令度。
Okay, so the first one is to cross over those who have not been crossed over. So when we are learning from the bodhisattvas to make a great resolve, to make vows, we want to also make vows to cross over those living beings who have not been crossed over in the sea of birth and death.
现在未解者令解。
To liberate those who have not been liberated.
这个呢，发这种第2个愿呢，是缘念那个极地而发起的。
Okay, when we make this vow, it comes from the noble truth of accumulation.
所以璎珞经说未解极地令解极地，所以解是解什么？解开什么呢？解开这个极地。你也可以说解脱这个极地然后我们众生呢，就是被极地使到我们造业，我们才会受生死轮回的。所以要把这一种造业的根解开掉解脱掉，不再有这个造业的根了。
Okay, so so the Diadem Sutra says that for those who have not been liberated from the noble truth, by knowing the noble truth of accumulation, we cause them to be liberated from this noble, with the noble truth of accumulation. That means that all living beings are still tied up by the suffering of accumulation. And because of that, we still have birth and death. So for those who have not been liberated, who have not been untied, we want to untie them so that 不再有什么之根 so there is no more source or roots to create evil,
对，
to create
然
karma.
后集是什么意思呢？好，这里说集就是我很喜欢这几个字的解释哦。集是指的什么？烦恼、论业、能招聚生死这几个字呢，讲的特别清楚。什么叫做集地啊？集地也就是我们的烦恼心啊，贪嗔痴慢疑啊，不正见啊，大烦恼、中烦恼、小烦恼，都是指的这个集地。
Okay, so what does the noble truth of accumulation means? It means that our afflictions nourishes our karma in such a way that it can attract and accumulate birth and death. So this is the affliction. This is the explanation for the noble truth of accumulation. So what are afflictions? Our afflictions are greed, anger, delusion, arrogance, doubts. Our great afflictions, our medium afflictions, our small afflictions, all kinds of afflictions we have.
这个他说这些以上我所讲的各种烦恼，它是叫做烦恼论业，就是有了烦恼心，才会让我们一直不断的去造业嘛。好，滋润那个造业的事情哈，叫烦恼论业。然后你只要一直不断的起烦恼造业，起烦恼造业的话，你就会招聚了无量的生死轮回。
Okay, so the fact that we create karma is because we are afflicted. If we have afflictions, we create karma. And that can really attract limitless and boundless cycles of birth and death.
有人问呢，起烦恼啊，刚才我看到有人写问题了啊，造业怎么是因为烦恼造的业呢？好，就是造业呢，其实有造善业跟恶业，这个你要搞清楚，造业是有善恶跟净，有三种，善业、恶业跟净业。那我们呢，修行的人，我们要修的是净业，好，一定要超越那个善恶啦。因为有善有恶，那还是带着一个我相来去做的善跟恶，那个还是生死轮回的业了啊。那我们要修的是净业，把我空了的那种善恨才是净业，这样才能够出轮回。我先讲这个，然后再继续讲这个烦恼论业的事情。
Okay, so someone asked, how do we create karma with our afflictions? When we create karma, we create wholesome karma, we create evil karma, we can also create pure karma. So we cultivators, we want to create pure karma so we can transcend good and evil. Because whether it's wholesome karma, good karma, or evil karma, it still has the characteristics of self. And with that characteristics of self, we will still transmigrate in the sea of birth and death. Only when we empty out the notion of self could we then create pure karma to transcend the sea of birth and death.
为什么说烦恼造业呢？很简单，譬如你很贪，贪也叫烦恼。你贪吃啊，你贪吃众生肉，贪众生的味道，众生肉的味道，因为你贪吃那个众生肉，就是这个贪心会使到你呢不能持长素，你每天要去吃众生肉，那你吃人家半斤也要还8两，如果他想加利息，他不满意你，你还要可能还几斤也不定，所以这种你就跟众生呢一起，像楞严经所说的，他就会你跟众生就结了一个缘，还会继续回来还债。你今世我吃的是这个羊肉，改天呢你要还债的时候，可能你变回羊，他又变成人，他来吃回你，所以就是滋润生死。你因为你的贪吃导致你去杀生或者偷盗或者邪淫，都会让你呢跟众生呢结了一些善缘恶缘，然后以后还要再倒回来跟他们相遇，互相的或者是还恩啊，或者是报仇，就会有这一种 这种生死的那种相缠的情况出现，所以贪嗔痴这些烦恼心呢，是招聚生死轮回的根本原因。我们要解开，不要生烦恼心，不要贪，也不要嗔，也不要愚痴，这些都是虚妄相，是无明觉得它是真，你才去追的，是我们无明而一直去追这些外在的相，然后才去跟众生结了无量的善恶缘，然后以后染污缘以后还要继续相遇，还要继续的在一起互相的环抱。
So how do we create karma with our afflictions? For example, greed. Greed is a kind of affliction. So we're greedy. Let's say we're greedy for the flesh and flavors of living beings. Flesh. We are greedy to eat meat, so that we cannot become a vegetarian to eat pure, to have pure diet. So if we eat, let's say, half a pound of living beings, flesh, we may have to repay 8 ounces of flesh. And if they're not very happy with us, we may have to pay interest. It's not certain. So the Shurangama Sutra said that we will continue to come back to this world to repay what we owed. For example, if you eat lamb, maybe next life you will become a lamb to repay what you ate. So to a point that your afflictions may cause you to go engage in stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and so on. And when we engage in these kind of behaviors in the future, we will still come back, we will encounter each other, we'll meet each other, whether we're repaying each other's kindness or whether we become enemies, that we revenge, we don't know. So basically, we have to pay back what we owe. And this will attract limitless cycles of birth and death. So don't be greedy, don't get angry, and don't be confused. The fact that we are greedy, we're angry, and we're confused is because of our afflictions, our ignorance. Our ignorance pushes us to chase after external characteristics, these external perceived notions of what we're greedy for, what we are craving for. And then eventually we meet up with certain living beings, we create defile affinities, and then in the future we will meet each other, we will encounter each other, and then we have to repay whatever we owed, whatever we created.
我们先继续讲哈，烦恼论业有2种，哈，因为大家都不知道什么叫烦恼啊，所以现在给你知道什么叫烦恼，可能你在烦恼当中你自己都不知道啊，哈。烦恼论业有2种。
Okay, so now we're talking about afflictions nourishes our karma. People probably don't know what afflictions are. Now we will talk about what afflictions are. So there are 2 kinds of afflictions that nourishes the karma.
第一个叫四住地烦恼。
The first is called afflictions from 4 dwelling grounds.
这个四住地烦恼呢，它会滋润的是什么生死呢？它会滋润分段生死的业，也就是一个人如果他的心是住在这种四住地的烦恼当中，他会推动你去造那个业，使到你受分段生死的轮回。
Okay, so the first one is called afflictions of 4 dwelling ground. So what really nourishes our karma? What nourishes this type of birth and death? So this kind of afflictions will nourish the karma of a birth and death.
分段
birth and physical birth and death. It will nourish the karma of physical birth and death.
所以就会招致分段生死的苦果。
So it will attract the suffering and results of physical birth and death.
那是什么叫四住地烦恼呢？其实也就是 我们凡夫在三界轮回的那个最根本的烦恼，叫做见思惑烦恼。
Okay, so what is the affliction of four dwelling grounds? Basically, they are the afflictions of seeing delusions and view delusions, and so
view
these
是不是？
view delusions and thinking delusions of the affliction in the three realms. That's what
对
causes us to transmigrate
对，
in this world.
第一个叫见一切住地哈，见一切住地的烦恼呢，那个是指三界的一切见惑，是知见上的迷惑。
Okay, so the first one is see the ground of see all dwellings. Basically, these are all seeing affliction, view afflictions or view delusions in all three realms.
因为这些烦恼的东西要讲了，真的我时间也是不够了，我只剩20分钟了，我不能讲得太详细哈。但就是说，我们众生呢，如果说你要次第断你的烦恼，第一个要先断就是叫见惑啦。可是见惑呢，你单单要断你的见惑，他说就像要断40里暴流那么难断啊。
Okay, because time is very limited, I only have 20 minutes left. I will not be able to detail each one of the afflictions, but basically these are view delusions. What is view delusion? View delusion, if you want to cut off view delusion, it's like you have to cut off 40 miles of torrents.
然后第二呢，就欲爱住地，就是指的欲界的一切私货。
Okay, so the second one is the ground of a dwelling in lust and love. That's all the thought delusion in the desire realm.
第三是色爱住地，是指的色界的一切私货。
The third is the ground of a dwelling in form and love. That is the thinking delusion of the form realms.
然后呢，第四呢是有爱住地。
The fourth one is the ground of existence and love, or dwelling in existence and love.
那个有爱之地指的是无色界的众生，他们的一切的私货。
And this refers to the thinking delusion of living beings in the formless realms.
然后这个见惑有88品哈，然后呢，欲爱住地也有几品的私货，色爱住地有几品私货，有爱住地有几品，总共有81品的私货啦。反正四住地的烦恼，就是指我们呢这些还在受轮回六道轮回的众生的根本烦恼，就见私货，很粗的，一看到你就有你的意见，就会使到你生烦恼心哈。或者一听到什么，你的意见呢，你个人的主观会使到你对这个事情有一种执着，有一个喜欢跟讨厌，然后你就会有很多的情绪，然后这个情呢，我有讲过嘛，七情呢就会使到你落入七趣的轮回嘛。所以这个见思惑呢，是真的会让我们看到、听到、想啊，都会有这种的迷惑。
Okay, so basically, there are 88 grades of view delusions, 81 grades of thinking or thought delusions based on these four grounds that we see on the screen. So basically, we have these are all our view delusions and thinking delusions. Everything, it is actually very coarse. Whatever we see, we have an opinion, and our opinion causes us to be afflicted. And with the matter and people we see, we have likes, dislikes. From our likes and dislikes, we have emotions. And when we have emotions, these will drag us down to the 7 destinies and hence transmigrate in the 6th path. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we think, we become confused.
然后呢，这个四住地烦恼哈，我可以用10种烦恼来概括啦。 你先翻译一下。
So the afflictions of four dwelling grounds could be summarized in 10 bullet points, 10 kinds of afflictions.
见惑方面呢，就是有5个：我见、边见、邪见、见取见、戒禁取见。法师，你可以翻吗？
I will try. So the the view delusions, there are 5, is the view of self, a view of extremity, deviant views, view of seeing and grasping, view of attaching to the precepts.
Prohibition. Prohibition.
Yeah, view of prohibition.
戒禁取。取也是 grasping on 那个 prohibition 嘛，跟 precept。就是讲我们每个人都会有这种见惑，我们最根本的见惑就是我见，每个人都有一个我喜欢这个事情不对，可是我爱呀，我看到我一定控制不了，我一定会去注意啊，会去看啊，会去听啊，不应该做我还是会做啊。你的我见推动你个人太执着你的想法，你的爱了，你的个人的知见，所以这个我见呢，会使到我们呢常常起种种的不同烦恼心。譬如你跟人家相处，别人对你呢稍微不公平，你就会不高兴了，不满意了。所以这个都是我见在作怪。所以为什么《金刚经》说我们一定修行的人要开般若智慧，一定要呢少三心空四相嘛。好，我空人空我众生我相人相众生相寿者相全部空，我是空的，哪里何来一个你对我不公平？连人也空，我也空，法也空了，就不会再去起那个烦恼心了嘛。所以有般若智慧呢，就不会起烦恼心，因为没有般若，就用无明就把它当真，虚妄的境界你把它当真来去抓，来去在乎，然后你就造了很多业咯，就要受轮回了。
Okay, so we have everyone has this affliction because everyone has this notion of self. You see something, although that something is really wrong, but you can't really control yourself, you will still chase after the states that you want to chase after. You may watch, you may engage in doing certain things. All this comes from the view of self. You're too attached to your own personal opinion. You're very opinionated. And because of this view of self, you have afflictions. Let's say if someone treats you not so fairly, then you're not very happy. This is because the view of self is acting up. So we as cultivators need to sweep away the 3 kinds of minds and empty out 4 kinds of characteristics, which are the characteristics of self, people, living beings, and longevity. And then you want to empty out the self, people, and Dharma. We want to use prajna, want to use wisdom to deal with people in everyday life instead of using afflictions, instead of using your ignorance, because you know that everything is an illusion, but you still go on to grasp on it, create karma, and eventually fall into the transmigration of the 6th path.
楞严经偶益大师说一意在目，空花乱坠，就是说我们众生呢看到的一切人生都是很真实的。他说这个其实就像一个人眼睛患了疫病，他看到天花空花乱坠，天上呢掉了很多花，很真实。其实他会看到，因为他眼睛有了病吗？那我们看到呢，我有生老病死，我有我有丈夫，我有几个孩子我有什么事业，你觉得很真？为什么你觉得真？因为你眼睛生了疫病，也就是你心里有了无明那个疫病就是指的无明，因为你有无明的根本无明，你才会把它当真，看到了有这个生死的事情。那所以我们呢修行呢，就是法华经所说要开示悟入佛的知见，我们要听经闻法，也要慢慢知道佛的知见，佛的知见最准确的嘛以佛知见作为我们的知见，我们就绝对不会生烦恼心，也不会去贪着这个娑婆的无常的乐，这样我们才能够出轮回。 会太长，法师。
Okay, so the Shrangama Sutra says, according to Great Master O.E.'s commentary, it says that due to this one-eye sickness, we see that flowers falling all over the place from the space, from the sky, from the air. He says that in life, we see everything as very real. It's because our eye, he used this analogy, it's because we have a disease in our eyes. And because this disease, we see the flowers falling in the air as very real. So in life, this means we see birth and death, sickness and old age. We have a husband, we have a wife, we have a professional career. We see everything as so real. Why is that? It's because we have sickness in our eyes, and this sickness refers to ignorance. Because of our ignorance, we see everything as very, very real. So in the process of cultivation, we want to open up to demonstrate, to be awakened to enter the Buddha's knowledge and views, or enter to have the Buddha's knowing and seeing, because the Buddha's knowing and seeing is most accurate, so that we won't have any more afflictions or have these thoughts. So we won't be greedy for chasing after the bliss in the Saha world, so that we can transcend transmigration in the world.
第二种叫无明住地烦恼，它会滋润变异生死，它是属于滋润变异生死的一种业，它会招聚变异生死的苦果。
Okay, so the second affliction is the affliction of dwelling in ignorance. This kind of afflictions can nourish the karma of birth and death by changes. It could also attract and accumulate the suffering and the suffering and retribution from birth and death by changes.
所以以上这个四住地烦恼，再加上无明住地烦恼，叫做五住地。然后这五种法会使我们众生生一切的过错，然后也会是属于一切的恒河沙数这么多的烦恼的根本的依处。为什么我们会起无量无边的烦恼？遇到不同的境界，我们又无端端又生了烦恼心，是什么力量推动的呢？根本是这些突然起的烦恼心，它的根本依处就是这个五住地烦恼。
Okay, so adding the afflictions on the four dwelling grounds plus this afflictions of dwelling in ignorance, these are called the five dwelling grounds. These cause living beings to make mistakes, and to give rise to all kinds of afflictions, myriad afflictions, like a sense in Ganges River. So when we encounter states, we give rise to afflictions, or all of a sudden we have certain afflictions. It's all because of the afflictions of all these five dwelling grounds.
然后呢，如果你发四弘誓愿，第二条愿就是这么样发的。若一切未解此二种疾者，菩萨发心愿令得解，故云未解者令解。就是发四弘誓愿第二条，我们就是说看到一切还没有解开这两种疾好的众生呢，我们菩萨发心，我们要让他们解开。好，这个就是发了第二种愿，未解者令解，解开一切众生的二种疾的烦恼，就四住地烦恼跟无明住地烦恼，要帮他们解。
Okay, so if any living beings who have not been liberated from these kind of two accumulations, bodhisattvas resolve upon bodhi, making vows to cause them to be liberated. Therefore, it's said to liberate those who have not been liberated. We want to untie living beings' knots and afflictions that comes from these five dwelling grounds, the four dwelling plus the ignorance dwelling.
OK 法师啊，刚才有很多人要求说加课，中国的居士很多个都是，他们说，您可不可以加课啊？一个月啊，就讲一次课而已。祈请法师慈悲啊，再加一次课啊，就是有的说其他法师一周一次，有的天天的。
we can talk about it later.
OK，我们看一下，还剩5分钟哈。为安者令安哦，四弘誓愿第3条哦，就是还没有就是发第3条愿呢，就是因为你要圆念的是道地因为要修道，所以就发了第3个愿没有安的，我要令他安在这个道上，所以璎珞经说为安道地，令安道地。
Okay, the third is to establish those who have not been established. The 4 great vows comes from this particular vow comes from the noble truth of the path. So the Diadem Sutra says, those who have not been established on the noble truth of the path, we should cause them to be established in the noble truth of path.
所以道，什么叫道？我们要修道，我们要安心住在道上，不要住在烦恼道，要住在佛道。
Okay, so what is path? We want to calm our mind to dwell on the path of Bodhi. We don't want to dwell on the path of afflictions.
对，然后这里的道指的是能够通向涅槃的那些正助道，能够助你修道的道叫正助道。这种正助道呢，是能够让你呢通向涅槃。
Okay, so the path here means it is the proper primary aiding path that can connect you to nirvana.
有2种正助道，第一叫偏圆真谛，因为你圆念真谛，也就是空，你圆念空的这个道理，所以你去修种种的正助道。这种道呢，只能够修成功，只能够成就的是小乘的净苦涅槃。
Okay, so there are 2 kinds of proper aiding path. The first one is universally conditioned upon the truth, means that we're cultivating this proper aiding path, but this path can reach you to the nirvana of the lesser vehicle where all sufferings have ended.
第2种呢是大乘的咯，叫做正圆中道实相，你要很正确的去圆念中道实相的道理，来去修种种的正助道。这一种的修法，你因为得到的是就是大乘的大般涅槃。
Okay, the second one is the proper conditions for the true reality of the middle way. These are for Mahayana practitioners, where we cultivate this proper aiding path, which can reach you to the prajna, the paramita of Mahayana path.
你这个是 Great Paramita，Parinirvana， 大乘
Parinirvana of Mahayana。
若一切未安此2种道者，菩萨发心愿令得安，故云未安道者令安也。就是说，你发第三条的四弘誓愿你就是呢，看一切还没有安住在这个佛道上的众生呢，这2种道啦，他还没有修，你就发心让他安住在这2种道，这个就是你菩萨发了这个心，他就会去做这个事咯，就会去把众生安伏在道上咯。不要让他们每天安住在这个生死轮回的日子一直搞轮回没意思就引领他们来学佛法，很喜欢修道，很喜欢念经拜佛听经闻法改恶向善，很喜欢持戒，让他们就安心住在佛道上就菩萨专门会做这个事情
Okay, so for any of those living beings who have not been established on these two paths, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas will bring forth the resolve to establish those living beings on this path. Therefore, it's said, for those who have not been established, Bodhisattva will establish them. So for the third vow, is for living beings to be established in these kinds of two paths. So they can bring forth the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas will bring forth the resolve to help living beings be established on these two paths, so that they will no longer transmigrate on the wheel of birth and death. For example, cause them to cultivate, to listen to Dharma, to bow to the Buddhas, to change their bad habits, to uphold the precepts, so on and so forth.
我们四弘誓愿只讲了3个哦，讲不完了。但是我希望你们呢，不用急。你有烦恼不是一下子可以解的，可是呢，烦恼要解要靠这个安的地方咯。你安住在道上，你就会没有烦恼了。所以这个，而且你要安的很安乐哦，还是要安住在中道，中道实相才会让你究竟大安。
Okay, so if we want to end afflictions, it's not so easy where we can just eliminate our afflictions all of a sudden. I think we need to rely on this particular vow to peacefully dwell yourself or establish yourself on this path of the way, then you have no more afflictions. So we want to establish or dwell ourselves in the middle way, so we can attain ultimate great peace.
好，我们现在下一次暂时定的就是明年了，1月22日。
Okay, so our next lecture will be January 22nd, 2022, which will be next year.
现在我们回向要不要加课呢？等我们再讨论。
Okay, so we will do transference now, whether we're adding more classes. We will discuss offline and get back to you.
愿以此功德庄严佛净土，上报四重恩，下济三途苦。若有见闻者，悉发菩提心，尽持以报身，同生极乐国。顶礼老和尚，一问讯，再问讯，三问讯。南无消灾延寿药师佛，南无阿弥陀佛。